Hi, I'm attorney Renee Osipov with Chelle Law, and we assist parents, guardians, and students who are having issues surrounding 504 plan accommodations. In this video, I'm addressing what a 504 plan looks like in California. So actually, 504 plans look the same in all 50 states because 504 plan accommodations are actually codified in federal statutes. So specifically the Rehabilitation Act, Section 504 of that federal act, those are the requirements of a 504 plan accommodations. And so this is federal law, so it applies to all 50 states. So if you are a public school or charter school within the state of California, 504 plan accommodation requirements are going to be the same anywhere else. Now, I say that states can add more specific guidelines on top of what the federal guidelines are, but they cannot offer any less than what is required by federal law. So let's talk about a 504 plan, who qualifies for it, what it looks like, and how it's implemented. So if you feel like you're a student or your child is a student who's potentially struggling in school, they may qualify for accommodations that are outlined in the 504 plan. Now, the way to know that if your child is going to qualify, first, federal statutes define this as a student must have either a physical or a mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. So what this looks like in practice, if a child maybe has a diagnosis of ADHD or anxiety or ODD, those are all would be considered potentially mental impairments or physical impairments. Were they in an accident and now have a TBI? Are they in a wheelchair? Do they need specific services for physical therapy or sensory processing? Things really is endless of what can be considered a diagnosis. Now, an IEP qualifying sort of disability has to fit into a category. With the 504 plan, though, it doesn't. So any diagnosis that you're going to get that's either physical or mental, as long as the student is substantially impaired while at school. And so this is where the second part comes in. So if you have a diagnosis that your child has some type of impairment, then you need to figure out with the 504 plan team or evaluation team if they are substantially impaired at school. So a lot of this boils down to observations of staff, typically the general education teacher, if they look like or are acting in such a way that the data shows that they're physically impaired, mentally impaired, and it's substantially limiting them within the education environment of the school. At that point, team will then decide if the child is eligible for accommodations or not. So if they are eligible, then what happens is the team meets. And when I say team members, this is parents or guardians. They are valued team members. Normally it's the general education teacher and then any other staff at the school, potentially the 504 plan coordinator, administration. This also could be therapist or someone who's working with the child on a daily basis. They'll come together and they will decide what areas of the school or the school day that the child needs the accommodations for. So is this in the general education classroom? Do they need accommodations transitioning in the hallway to other classes, potentially specials? So PE, music, library, art, bathroom accommodations, cafeteria. This is the big one that I think gets overlooked, but any child who has sensory processing disorders, the cafeteria is the worst place for them to be. It's extremely overstimulating, smells, sound, it's loud, it's smelly, there's a lot of visuals going on, they're eating their food. So it really is a place that you want to remember whenever you're thinking about those areas that need accommodations. Then we're going to go into the actual accommodations themselves. So My opinion with when you're writing or drafting your accommodations, you need to be as specific and straightforward as possible, because it's likely that multiple people would see that 504 plan. So if it's an accommodation, let's say that a child gets extended time on exams. Well, the general education teacher is likely going to know how much extra time they're given. But if there's a substitute or admin staff are giving out evaluations or exams, and they look at that accommodation, they're not going to know how much extra time is actually needed. Can the child stay all day working on that exam? Is it double the time of everybody else? Is it triple? So when it comes to writing the actual accommodations, I always recommend to be very specific, so that if anybody picks up the 504 plan within the school, including cafeteria workers, specials, teachers, substitutes, admin, aides, anybody, they will be able to read that and know exactly how to implement that accommodation. And then next, you need to go into how frequently this accommodation is going to be implemented. So if we're talking on exams, anytime spelling tests are given on a Friday, then the accommodation would then come into play. If this is a cafeteria accommodation, every day during lunchtime. If this is therapy, maybe OT, sometimes it's best if it's written in actual minutes for frequency, because sometimes it's difficult for the therapist to come in every day at a specific time, but it's easier for them to implement the same amount of minutes. So if something comes up and they can't be there on a Monday, that's okay. They can come in on Tuesday, just as long as they're giving the same number of minutes of actual therapy, because that's what's really important. Also, in the 504 plan, you're going to want to attach any type of medical information that's going to outline the diagnosis of the child. And then anybody who attends the meeting is going to have to, they normally just sign a document indicating that they're present. The thing I think parents have to remember, though, again, and guardians, is that you do have a lot of legal rights and remedies. If you disagree with the evaluations, you can ask for an outside evaluator, a second opinion. You can actually request, if the school still denies a 504 plan, or if there's a 504 plan and they're not implementing it. This is the biggest thing we hear from clients, is the school's telling them that these are guidelines. They're not really guidelines. They are accommodations which protect the student from discrimination because of their disability. So if the child is not getting a 504 plan, or if they have one and it's not being implemented correctly, parents can actually file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, and there is a dispute process that will be handled with the school regarding the 504 plan accommodations. So I think the biggest thing is, parents, there are ways to hold the school accountable if you feel like you're not getting anywhere. I will say, though, that it's best if you start with, if you're requesting accommodations or you're requesting them to comply with the 504 plan, send in an official letter detailing that with dates and times. That's really important to kind of get that process started. And then if there is ever any type of legal dispute in the future, you have that information for your record. But yeah, so again, just to kind of summarize everything, 504 plans are codified in federal law. Student has to have a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits a major life event. Then if this happens, and you can check those boxes, and they're going to qualify for 504 plan accommodations. When you're writing the 504 plan, remember, parents, you are part of the team. You do have a voice. You do have legal rights and remedies. And again, when the accommodations are being drafted, just make sure that anyone that looks at them will know how to implement them. If you have any additional questions or you'd like more information, you can check out our website, which is in the description below this video. Our contact information is also in there as well. Happy to set up a consultation with me. I'm an attorney and well-versed in 504 plans and enforcing them and drafting accommodations. So either If you feel like your child needs a 504 plan, we're happy to consult you on how to accomplish that. If the school is not complying with it, we're also happy to consult on how to get them in compliance. So thanks.